Good morning. My name is Jan René Zuluaga, and I am going to present the work entitled Parallel Computing of Power System Transients through Polyphase-QMF Filter Banks. I come from Simvestab, Mexico. We all knew well that digital simulators of transient are essential for proper design and operation of modern power systems. As power systems become larger and complex, transient tools require longer execution time and higher computational costs. For example, statistical transient studies often involve thousands of simulations of variation of the same systems under different operation conditions or switching conditions. The current strategies adopted to speed up simulation time in power systems are use of faster hardware, for example, last technology hardware or parallel processing hardware, use of reduced network equivalents, and the use of network subdivision into decoupled subnetworks for parallel processing. The shortcomings of those strategies are that the synthesis of passive equivalents is still a challenging task, and time decoupled subdivision is conditioned by the network topology, leading often to computationally unbalanced processes. The conventional approach in transient computation uses the nodal or modified nodal analysis, where a conductance matrix is triangularized. Each switch operation or change of topology involves retriangularization or partial retriangularization of the matrix because all switches are concentrated at lower right corner of G matrix. The parallel conventional approach consists in a power system subdivision between time decoupled subsystems separated by time delays elements such as transmission lines. In this approach, conductance matrix is block diagonal. The disadvantages of this solution are subdivision are restricted by network topology, and it may lead to unbalanced computation loads among each subsystem. Recall that the computation speed is limited by the slowest subsystem in parallel. In the proposed approach, transient events are represented by switches. The network model is synthesized as Weisbus matrix in Laplace domain and then is executed in time domain. Cron reduction is applied to Weisbus matrix, leaving in explicit form only the nodes of interest for the transient study, such as switch nodes and measure nodes. And finally, transient responses are obtained in time domain through long convolution performed by Polyphase-QMF filter banks. In nodal representation, we start building Weisbus matrix in frequency domain. The size of the matrix is usually large. For that reason, it is proposed to subdivide the Weisbus matrix into two principal parts. Y1 or Y11 that represents switch and observation nodes, and Y22 that represents unchained and non-observed nodes. Then a Cron reduction is applied, and this expression is obtained. The reduction matrix or the reduced matrix is obtained with this other expression. On continuing from this expression and solving for V1, we obtain next expression composed by two terms, VSS and VTR. VSS is the voltage from state-to-state sources, and VTR is the voltage from switching operations. On applying inverse Laplace transform, this expression in time domain is obtained. In this expression, the multiplication between the impedance reduced, seed reduced, and the current vector I1 is transformed in a convolution, and VSS can be solved with a phasor techniques in a steady state. For closing and opening switch model, the superposition theorem is used. For switch closure, A voltage source is connected between the switch nodes in order to cancel the voltage between those nodes. That voltage source can be converted to current source by means of source transformation, obtaining this figure. For switch opening, the current through the closed switch is evaluated, and then an injection of the same current in the opposite direction is connected, as shown in this figure. In summary, both closing and opening can be simulated by superposition theorem of current sources. Returning to the calculation of transient voltage and steady state voltages, each switch operation could be evaluated through net recursive formula. In the formula, P represents each switch operation. Note that the evaluation of this multiplication is through these expressions, and in this expression, the current vector is 0 in all nodes except in K and L nodes, where the switch is connected. Taking advantage of this structure, the matrix through vector multiplication can be reduced to vector to scalar multiplication. The vector is composed by the difference between columns K and L in C matrix, and the scalar is the switch current from the switch model. For time domain execution of the model, it is necessary to apply the inverse Laplace transform to the recursive formula obtaining next expression. In this expression, Ck is composed by the difference between columns where the switch is connected, and this vector was reduced to the nodes under interest with Cron reduction. And then it was taken to time domain through numerical Laplace transform. In resume, the net recursive formula is obtained. Note that all terms in the recursive formula are in time domain except of Ck. Ck is originally in frequency domain. So the inverse numerical Laplace algorithm must be applied to each one of the N1 elements of Ck. Filter is reduced. The most of the computations are due to the convolution in this equation. In this expression, N1 convolutions are performed for each switch action. Convolutions are treated by means of digital filters, representation of the impedance vector Z, and then a realization by means of polyphase filter is proposed as shown in the figure. In the last representation, the power of M is the power of Z in the filter are all multiples of M. M is the decimation factor or acceleration factor. Each filter in the polyphase structure has a reduced length of L, as is shown in this equation. Then a cascade connection between the filter bank and the polyphase filter structure is performed to simplify the polyphase filter. In this connection, the novel identity is applied in order to commute the convolution through polyphase filter structure to the bank low sampling rate. There are M squared convolution in the bank low sampling rate. However, each convolution is between signal of L length. In the table, there is resumed the number of operations performed by the serial approach versus the polyphase filter bank approach. In both representations, the same number of operations are performed. However, in polyphase filter bank structure, those operations are performed in parallel. In the parallel approach, the length of each signal in the convolution is reduced by a factor of M, and the acceleration time in the computation is approximately M squared. The polyphase filter bank representation allows a perfect reconstruction of the signal. However, the output of the bank is delayed M time steps. This delay can be neglected if compared with acceleration factor. A test case composed by 17 buses is simulated with the proposed technique and compared with PSCAD and frequency domain techniques based on numerical Laplace transform. The test system is composed by 4 generators, 4 transformers, 12 overhead lines, and 3 underground cables. The figure presents the one-line diagram of the system. Cables and overhead lines are represented with full frequency-dependent parameters. The result of the simulation for nodes 2 and 12 are presented in the left-hand side of the slide. A ground foul is simulation, and after 25 milliseconds, the foul disappears. All techniques provide practically the same results, validating the correct operation of the proposed tool. The right-hand side of the simulation, the right-hand side of the slide shows the result of an energization in node 3 and 8 of the same study case. But this time, a simulation is carried out in an FPGA, obtaining again the similar results in all cases. The simulation in FPGA is done in 21.7 microseconds, which corresponds to 1,843 times faster than real time. The conclusions. A new methodology has been proposed to simulate power system transients in real time and in accelerated time. The network model is synthesized in Laplace domain and executed in time domain through long convolutions. Network complexity is reduced through Cron reductions, thus avoiding passivity problems. Multi-rate and parallel execution is achieved through Polyphase-QMF filter banks. Parallelization is independent of network topology. Preliminary test on an FPGA delivers speeds 1,843 times faster than real time. And finally, one limitation of the proposed method is that the simulation time must be pre-stabilized. Thank you. Any question?